For centuries, humanity believed they were alone in the vast universe. They dreamed of distant worlds, advanced civilizations, and endless possibilities. But when the Galactic Empire arrived, those dreams turned into a nightmare. The Empire, a coalition of powerful alien races, had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, crushing every species that resisted. To them, Earth was just another planet to conquer. They sent a message that echoed across the skies: surrender or be destroyed. But humans were different. They did not surrender. They fought. The first attack came without warning. Giant warships, larger than cities, appeared in Earth's orbit, blocking out the sun. The skies burned as energy blasts rained down on major cities. Skyscrapers crumbled, streets turned to fire, and millions perished in the first wave. But amid the destruction, something unexpected happened. Humanity refused to fall. They did not have the technology or the firepower of the Empire, but they had something far greater: resilience. Where other civilizations had bowed, humans resisted. They adapted, they learned, and they struck back. The resistance began in the ruins of New York, where survivors gathered under the leadership of a former military strategist, Captain Ryan Cole. He had seen the destruction firsthand, but he knew that the war was not over. "They think we're weak," he told his people. "They think we will break. But they don't know us." Across the world, similar uprisings began. From the underground bunkers of Moscow to the jungles of South America, humans fought back with whatever they had: guns, explosives, even primitive guerrilla tactics. The Empire had expected an easy victory, but instead, they found themselves in a war unlike any they had fought before. As the battle raged on, humanity discovered something the Empire had never considered: a weakness hidden in plain sight. The Empire relied on fear to control its people. Entire species had been enslaved, forced to obey without question. But now, those same species were watching Earth fight back, watching as humans who should have been wiped out in days stood against the might of the galaxy. Whispers of rebellion spread through the Empire's ranks. Some alien factions, tired of being under the Empire's rule, saw an opportunity. If humans could resist, then maybe they could too. The turning point came when a high-ranking defector from the Empire, an alien scientist named Varlek, brought critical intelligence to the human resistance. He revealed the existence of a doomsday device, a weapon powerful enough to destroy Earth in an instant. The Empire had built it as a last resort, hidden deep within their most secure fortress. If activated, Earth would be wiped from existence. Humanity had no choice. They had to strike first. With the help of their newfound allies, humans launched a daring assault on the heart of the Empire. Using stolen ships and cloaking technology, they infiltrated the enemy's stronghold. It was a mission doomed to fail, a suicide run against impossible odds. But humans had always thrived in the impossible. As Captain Cole and his team fought their way through heavily guarded corridors, the Empire's forces struggled to comprehend what was happening. Never before had an enemy dared to bring the fight directly to them. Explosions shook the fortress as humans planted charges across the facility. The final battle was brutal. Every corridor became a war zone. Every second, a fight for survival. The Emperor himself, a being of immense power and cruelty, watched in disbelief as his forces crumbled. He had underestimated humanity, and now he was paying the price. With one final act of defiance, Captain Cole activated the explosives and destroyed the doomsday device, ensuring Earth's survival. But the blast also triggered a chain reaction, tearing through the Empire's stronghold, sending shockwaves across the galaxy. The Empire was falling. As the dust settled, the galaxy stood in silence. The once invincible Empire had been defeated not by superior technology, not by overwhelming numbers, but by the sheer will of a species that refused to be conquered. Across the stars, enslaved civilizations rose up, inspired by humanity's defiance. The war was over, but a new era had begun, one where humans were no longer just survivors. They were warriors, legends, and the spark that ignited a revolution. And so, against all odds, Earth had won. Not because they were the strongest, but because they were unbreakable. The galaxy would never forget the day humanity stood alone against an empire and emerged victorious. The day they proved that no matter the enemy, no matter the cost, humans never give up. The sky was no longer blue. It was covered with the dark shadows of massive alien warships, their metal hulls reflecting the dying light of Earth's cities. The Galactic Empire had arrived with its full force, determined to crush the last pockets of human resistance. They had given Earth a choice: surrender or be erased from existence. But humanity had already made its decision. They would rather die fighting than live on their knees. The battle for Earth had begun, and there was no turning back. The once thriving cities had turned into battlegrounds. Streets were filled with smoldering ruins. Buildings had crumbled under the weight of orbital strikes, and the air smelled of fire and death. But in the heart of this destruction, humanity stood defiant. Armed with whatever they could find, they fought back against an enemy that saw them as nothing more than insects. Soldiers, civilians, scientists, everyone who could hold a weapon had joined the fight. They knew they were outmatched, outnumbered, and outgunned. But they had something the Empire did not: the will to survive. In an underground bunker beneath the remains of Washington, Captain Ryan Cole, leader of Earth's resistance, studied the holographic display of enemy movements. His face was covered in dirt and sweat, his uniform torn, but his eyes burned with determination. "They think we are weak," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos above. "They think we will break. But they don't know us. We are not just fighting for survival, we are fighting for everything we are." Around him, the remaining leaders nodded. They had lost too much to give up now. They had seen their homes destroyed, their loved ones taken, their planet turned into a battlefield. Surrender was not an option. The Empire's forces advanced through the ruined streets, their towering war machines crushing everything in their path. Squads of alien soldiers moved in perfect coordination, their energy rifles cutting down any resistance. But the humans had learned to adapt. They struck from the shadows, using the broken landscape to their advantage. Snipers hidden in the wreckage took down enemy officers, explosive traps turned narrow alleys into death traps, and ambush teams struck hard before vanishing into the ruins. The aliens, who had expected an easy conquest, found themselves in a war unlike anything they had faced before. In the skies, fighter jets weaved through enemy fire, launching desperate attacks against the massive warships above. Pilots who had trained for conventional wars now found themselves in a fight for humanity's survival. Each mission was suicide, but they flew anyway, knowing that every second they delayed the enemy gave those on the ground a fighting chance. On the ocean, what remained of Earth's Navy launched missiles at orbital targets, their weapons barely scratching the advanced alien hulls. But they refused to stop. If they could not win, they would make the enemy bleed for every inch of Earth. As the battle raged, humanity's greatest minds worked tirelessly to find a way to turn the tide. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, a group of scientists had discovered something: a weakness. The Empire's ships were nearly indestructible, but their energy shields had a flaw. If overloaded with enough concentrated firepower, they would temporarily collapse. It was a small window, barely a few seconds long, but it was all humanity needed. The Resistance sent out a desperate message to every surviving fighter, tank, and missile battery: focus all fire on the enemy flagships. We have one chance. The counterattack began. Every remaining weapon on Earth was aimed at the sky. Artillery shells, laser cannons, nuclear warheads, everything was fired at the same time. The night sky lit up with explosions as the combined firepower of humanity slammed into the Empire's fleet. For a moment, it seemed useless. The shields held. The enemy ships loomed above, untouched, and then one of them flickered. Just for a second. But that was enough. A squadron of jets, loaded with the last of Earth's experimental weapons, broke through the defenses and launched their payload directly into the exposed ship. The explosion was blinding. The alien warship, once thought to be invincible, began to fall. The sight of their flagship crashing into the ocean sent shockwaves through the enemy ranks. The invincible Empire had never lost a war. They had never faced a species that could fight back like this. Doubt spread among their soldiers. If humans could take down one ship, could they take down more? Could they actually win? The fear of defeat, something the Empire had never known, crept into their minds. And that fear became their downfall. Sensing the enemy's hesitation, humanity pushed harder. Guerrilla fighters stormed enemy outposts, hacking into their communication networks and spreading chaos among their ranks. In space, rebel factions within the Empire, inspired by Earth's defiance, turned against their overlords. Alien soldiers, once loyal to the Emperor, began to switch sides. The Empire was no longer fighting just humans. They were fighting a war they could not control. And then the final strike came. In a last, desperate mission, Captain Cole and his team infiltrated the Empire's command center on Earth. They fought through heavily armed guards, each step bringing them closer to the control room. The Emperor himself, watching from his throne on a distant world, realized that he had lost. With one final command, he ordered a retreat. The war that was supposed to end in Earth's destruction had ended in the Empire's humiliation. As the alien ships fled, the battlefield fell silent. The ruins of Earth still smoldered, but humanity had done the impossible. They had stood against an enemy that ruled the galaxy, and they had survived. The cost was unimaginable. Entire cities had been wiped out, billions were dead, and the planet would never be the same. But they had won. They had proven that humanity was not weak, not broken, not something to be conquered. The Empire had come to crush them, but in the end, it was humanity that refused to fall. The war was over, but the legend had just begun. Across the galaxy, the story of Earth's defiance spread like wildfire. Other enslaved worlds, inspired by the humans, began to rise up. The Empire, once thought to be eternal, was now crumbling from within. And at the center of it all was a species that had refused to surrender, that had fought against impossible odds and emerged victorious. The universe would never be the same again. Humanity had not just survived, they had changed the fate of the entire galaxy. The war that had started on Earth was no longer just about survival. It had become something far greater. Humanity, once seen as nothing more than a weak and primitive race, had done the impossible. They had survived the Galactic Empire's invasion. Not only had they defended their planet, but they had struck back, crippling the enemy's forces and exposing their weaknesses. Now, the battle was no longer confined to Earth. The war had spread beyond the planet's atmosphere, reaching the stars, where humanity was taking the fight to the enemy's own territory. The Galactic Empire, which had ruled with fear for thousands of years, was now facing an uprising unlike anything it had ever seen. The rebellion had begun. Across the stars, enslaved civilizations watched in awe as humans fought back. For centuries, these species had believed the Empire to be unbeatable. They had seen their worlds conquered, their people forced into servitude, their voices silenced. But now, everything had changed. Earth's defiance had lit a fire of hope across the galaxy, and one by one, the oppressed worlds began to rise. Secret resistance groups that had been waiting for an opportunity now saw their moment. The rebellion was no longer just humanity's fight. It was a war for freedom, and it was spreading faster than the Empire could control. Captain Ryan Cole, the leader of Earth's resistance, stood aboard the first human warship to ever leave the solar system. It was a stolen Imperial cruiser, heavily modified with human technology, now renamed Defiance. It was more than just a ship, it was a symbol. From the bridge, Cole watched the stars blur past as they prepared for their next mission. Their target was Ephraxis Prime, a world under strict Imperial rule, where millions of enslaved aliens were forced to build weapons for the enemy. If the rebellion could take this planet, it would prove to the galaxy that the Empire was not invincible. It would send a message that the resistance was not just surviving, it was winning. As the fleet approached the planet, tension filled the air. The Empire's forces were strong, but they had not expected an attack here. They still believed humans were fighting only to defend Earth, not realizing that humanity had already moved beyond that. The battle began with a surprise assault. Hacked Imperial drones turned against their own ships. Human fighters darted through enemy formations, and ground forces launched a daring drop into the heart of the planet's military command. Explosions rocked the sky as Earth's forces engaged the enemy, and for the first time, the Empire's soldiers hesitated. They had been trained to see humans as weak, but the reality was far different. On the surface, the enslaved species watched in shock as human soldiers stormed the imperial fortresses. No one had ever dared to fight for them before. They had always believed that resistance was impossible, that the Empire's rule was unbreakable. But then, they saw something they had never expected: imperial soldiers retreating. The humans were winning. That was when the first group of slaves took up arms. At first, it was only a handful, using stolen weapons, fighting alongside their liberators. But as the battle raged on, their numbers grew. The rebellion was no longer just an invasion, it was a full-scale uprising. The people of Aphraxis Prime had chosen to fight for their own freedom, and by the end of the battle, the Empire had lost control of the planet. News of the victory spread faster than light. Other enslaved worlds, once too afraid to resist, now saw the truth: the Empire was not invincible. The rebellion was real, and humanity was leading the charge. Across the galaxy, secret resistance cells activated. Imperial supply lines were attacked, communications were disrupted, and entire fleets were ambushed by forces they had never expected. The war that had once been a single invasion of Earth had now turned into a full-scale galactic revolution. The Empire was crumbling, not just because of humanity's strength, but because of the hope they had given to others. But victory came at a cost. The Empire, desperate to regain control, unleashed its deadliest forces. Elite assassin units were sent to eliminate human leaders. Entire cities on rebellious planets were burned to the ground, and imperial warlords turned to brutal tactics, wiping out entire species in an attempt to crush the uprising. The rebellion was growing, but so was the cost of defiance. Captain Cole knew that humanity could not stop now. They had started something that could not be undone, and if they faltered, the Empire would come back stronger than ever. The final message from Earth's High Command was clear: push forward, no matter the cost. More human warships were being built, more soldiers trained, and more alliances formed. Humanity was no longer just fighting for itself, it was fighting for an entire galaxy's freedom. The Empire had ruled through fear, but now that fear was working against them. Every planet they lost, every fleet they failed to protect, and every species that joined the rebellion pushed them closer to collapse. As Captain Cole prepared for the next battle, he looked out at the fleet of human and alien ships gathered under one banner. They had come from different worlds, different backgrounds, and different struggles, but now they fought for the same cause. This was no longer just humanity's war. It was a war for all who had ever suffered under the Empire's rule. The rebellion was not just spreading, it was unstoppable. The Empire had underestimated humanity once, and now it was paying the price. The war was far from over, but one thing was certain: the stars now belonged to the rebellion. The rebellion had spread across the stars, shaking the foundations of the Galactic Empire. Planets that had once been under strict control were now rising in defiance, and the Empire's fleets were being stretched thin. But even as the war escalated, there was one thing that no one could understand: why did the Emperor seem so calm? Despite the growing rebellion, despite the countless defeats, despite the crumbling grip of his rule, the Emperor never showed signs of fear. He was hiding something. Something so powerful that he believed it would turn the tide in his favor. Humanity and their allies had to find out what it was before it was too late. Captain Ryan Cole, now a legend among rebels, had been leading humanity's forces through one victory after another. But even he knew that something felt wrong. Every battle, every mission, every world they freed, it all felt like they were playing into the Emperor's hands. He had expected the Empire to fight harder, to unleash all of its power, yet there was a strange sense of control behind their losses, as if they were letting the rebellion think they were winning. And then a message came through. A distress signal from deep within the Empire's core territories. It was not from a rebel cell or an enslaved world. It was from inside the Imperial Palace itself. The message was simple: if you want to win this war, come to Eros 9. The Emperor's secret will end everything. It could have been a trap, but something about it felt real. The Resistance couldn't ignore it. A small team, including Captain Cole, infiltrated the Empire's most guarded sector, Eros 9, a planet that was off-limits even to high-ranking Imperial officials. It was said to be the birthplace of the Emperor's rule, a place that no one had ever returned from. What they found there changed everything. Deep beneath the surface of Eros 9, hidden away from the eyes of the galaxy, was a laboratory. Not just any laboratory, but something far older than the Empire itself. The walls were covered in ancient carvings, glowing with strange energy. Machines pulsed with power, monitoring something alive. And at the center of it all, in a massive containment field, was a creature. A being that defied logic, something that looked both human and inhuman at the same time. It was trapped, its body connected to thousands of machines that were draining its energy. And then, the truth was revealed. This was not just any creature. It was the source of the Emperor's power. The Emperor was not a god, not a supreme ruler, not an all-powerful being as he had claimed for centuries. He was nothing without this creature. This ancient entity had been imprisoned for thousands of years, its power harvested to keep the Emperor immortal, to fuel his fleets, to control the minds of the weak. The entire empire was built upon this one stolen power. And now, the resistance had found it. But before Cole and his team could react, alarms blared. The Emperor knew they were there. A massive force of Imperial guards stormed the facility, led by the Emperor's most elite warriors. The battle was brutal, but the resistance had one advantage: they knew the truth now. And the truth was more dangerous than any weapon. As the fight raged on, Cole made a decision that would change the fate of the galaxy. Instead of trying to destroy the Emperor, he freed the creature. The moment the containment field collapsed, the entire planet shook. The being that had been trapped for millennia opened its eyes. The energy that had been stolen from it for centuries surged outward in a massive pulse, shutting down every Imperial weapon, every ship, every system that had relied on its stolen power. The Empire's fleets across the galaxy went dark. The Emperor, feeling his power slip away, screamed in rage. For the first time in history, he was afraid. The creature, now free, looked at Cole. It did not speak with words, but in that instant, he understood. This being had once been the ruler of an ancient civilization, long before the Empire existed. The Emperor had betrayed it, enslaved it, used its power to build his dominion. And now, it was free to take revenge. With a single thought, the creature vanished, leaving behind only a whisper in Cole's mind: end him. The team barely escaped Eros 9 as the planet collapsed in on itself. The Emperor's darkest secret was no longer hidden. The truth spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The Empire had not been built on strength, but on a lie. Without the creature's power, the Emperor was just a man who had cheated death, who had controlled the galaxy through stolen energy, who had ruled through deception. His people, his soldiers, his allies, they all now knew the truth. And the rebellion was no longer fighting against an unstoppable force. They were fighting against a fraud. As the news spread, Imperial forces began to turn. Entire fleets refused to follow orders. Planets that had once been loyal revolted. The Emperor, desperate and weakened, tried to hold on to power, but it was too late. His secret had been exposed. His empire was falling apart, and humanity, the species he had once seen as insignificant, had been the ones to bring him to his knees. The final battle was near. The Emperor, stripped of his stolen power, had retreated to his last stronghold. He was still dangerous, still ruthless, but he was no longer invincible. The rebellion was ready. Humanity was ready. The war that had started with Earth's defiance was about to end with the fall of the greatest tyrant the galaxy had ever known. And this time, there would be no mercy. The time had come. After years of rebellion, humanity stood at the edge of victory, but they were about to face the greatest challenge of their lives. The Galactic Empire, battered and broken, still held one final weapon: its ultimate fleet, an armada of ships that could crush entire planets in minutes. The Emperor was gone, his dark power shattered, but his loyalists remained, desperate to avenge their fallen leader. And now, they were bringing everything they had to wipe out the rebellion once and for all. It was a war that would decide everything: do or die. Captain Ryan Cole, now a seasoned leader of the rebellion, stared at the stars through the viewport of the Defiance, humanity's flagship. The fleet had gathered at the edges of the galaxy, near a barren, lifeless world that the Empire had once used as a staging ground for its forces. It was here that the final battle would take place. Cole had seen the horrors the Empire was capable of, the countless lives they had destroyed, and he knew that this would be their last chance to win. If they failed, humanity would be wiped out and the galaxy would fall back into the grip of the Empire. The stakes had never been higher. The enemy fleet arrived just as Cole expected, massive, imposing, and seemingly unstoppable. Hundreds of battleships supported by countless smaller vessels, all flying the dark banner of the Empire. They moved in perfect formation, as though they were ready to reclaim what was once theirs. But they had underestimated the power of the rebellion. The humans had allies, now freed species from across the galaxy who had once been enslaved by the Empire, all united for one purpose: to end the Empire's reign forever. The battle would not just be for survival, it would be for the future of the entire galaxy. The first wave of attacks came swiftly. Imperial warships fired powerful lasers, cutting through the void with deadly precision. The rebellion responded with everything they had: fighter ships darting in and out of enemy formations, massive capital ships firing back, and soldiers on the ground pushing forward despite the overwhelming odds. Cole's heart raced as he watched the battle unfold. He knew that this moment would define history, but it also felt like a test of humanity's very soul. Would they stand firm, or would they crumble under the weight of such an impossible challenge? As the battle raged on, it became clear that the Empire was not just fighting to win, they were fighting to exterminate humanity. The Imperial fleet was focused on obliterating the Defiance, believing that if they could destroy humanity's flagship, the rebellion would collapse. But Cole had a secret weapon: human ingenuity. His engineers had been working around the clock to prepare a plan that would take the Empire by surprise. The rebel fighters were outfitted with new technology, small but powerful devices that could disable the Empire's ships, rendering their weapons useless for a short time. It was a risky move, but it was their only chance. As the battle reached its peak, the first of the Empire ships fell silent. A massive battleship, the Dreadnought, the pride of the Imperial fleet, suddenly went dark. Its weapons systems shut down, and it drifted helplessly through space, vulnerable to attack. The rebellion's fighters swarmed in, tearing through its defenses. It wasn't long before the Dreadnought was reduced to debris. But this victory was fleeting. The Empire's forces reacted quickly, sending reinforcements to push back. The battle was far from over, and the tides of war were shifting unpredictably. On the surface of the barren planet, rebel ground forces were making their last stand. Despite the overwhelming strength of the Imperial forces, the rebels held their ground. They fought with everything they had: fists, weapons, and sheer determination. The planet had no strategic value, but it was symbolic. This was the final act, the last stand for all of humanity. As Cole led his squad into the heart of the enemy's stronghold, he knew that victory would come at a high cost. The enemy had too many troops, too many weapons, but the humans had one thing the Empire didn't: in space. The battle reached a critical point. The rebel forces, though heavily outnumbered, had a new strategy. They had managed to disable enough of the Empire's ships to send a message to the rest of the galaxy. The war was winnable. As the tide turned, other systems began to rise. Star systems that had once been silent sent reinforcements to the battlefield. It was clear now humanity was not alone. The rebellion was stronger than ever, and the galaxy had begun to change. The Empire's grip was weakening. But even as victory seemed within reach, Cole received word that the Empire was preparing one final strike. Their remaining forces had activated their doomsday weapon, a device powerful enough to destroy not just the rebellion, but the entire solar system. If the weapon was fired, it would wipe out everything. Earth, the heart of the rebellion, would be destroyed. Time was running out. The final decision lay with Cole. Could he stop the weapon in time? Could humanity's last hope survive? Cole and his team stormed the weapon facility, fighting their way through swarms of Imperial soldiers. The countdown had already begun. The weapon was primed to fire, and every second that passed brought them closer to total destruction. But the humans were ready. With a final push, they reached the control room, and Cole himself had to make the most difficult decision of his life: destroy the weapon and risk everything, or let the Empire's final strike land and ensure the galaxy would never recover.